Arise, champion! This is the world famous Steve Weatherford Show, where each week we bring you stories, messages, and guests to create massive breakthroughs in your life. Somebody say greatness! This show has been strategically designed to accelerate you, to thrust you to the next level. Greatness is in you because greatness made you, and we're gonna help you get into the center of God's calling for your life. Arise, champion! Nothing can be denied the one that won't be denied. The question is, how bad do you want it? Turn the speakers up, call a friend and tell them Steve Weatherford is on.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Steve Weatherford Show. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome. We're sitting here with two very special men in my life. And before I introduce them, I'm going to pray. I'm going to bless this show. Then I'm going to set a little bit of context for the show. There's a lot of power in the room right now. There's a lot of strength, and I'm not just talking about physically. I'm talking about spiritually. So I'm really excited for you to meet Josh and my pastor and my mentor. But let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Holy Spirit, we just submit. We just ask that you would just go before us, that you would give the listeners on YouTube, the listeners on podcasts, that you would just eliminate distractions for them right now, and then you would allow them to hear a word from you. We just thank you for the time that's invested in my spiritual mentor being here. And we just ask that you would just continue to have your hand upon his life as he's reaching and he's still growing at 63 years old. We just ask that favor would continue to be upon him, that you would just go before him and make the crooked path straight. And we just thank you for his ministry. We thank you for the ministry of the Steve Weatherford Show. We just thank you for everybody that makes a contribution behind the scenes to make this show happen. And we just ask that this ultimately would bless and bring favor into the lives of the listeners as they invest time, non-distracted, taking notes, and really allowing a seed to be planted in their life. We thank you. We praise your name. It's in Jesus' name we pray these things. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so now that we've given Holy Spirit permission to go before us, I want to introduce who we're here with. A lot of people have heard my testimony. A lot of people have heard me maybe give an invitation to Jesus, and the thing that I do right before I give my invitation is I read a poem. It's called Choose Your Heart. It's also a way that I start my day every single day as I read the poem to remind myself what my life is about, and the fact that even when I'm choosing Jesus doesn't mean that it's going to be easier, but it does mean that it's going to be worth it. So the man that wrote that poem and the man that's really been mentoring me and teaching me how to grow, not just in my physical and my financial authority, but most importantly, to be able to step into being a real spiritual leader in my home, a spiritual leader to my friends, a spiritual leader to myself. So when I look at like the decathlon of life and all the events that are asked of a man, not just protecting, providing, and presiding, but all the different hats, men and women, that we wear, I believe what makes us, what is going to allow us to stand before God and really be proud of who we are, that we maximized our gifts, isn't to stand before God and say, hey, God, you were calling me to perform in 10 events in life, and man, dude, I was the best in the world at 2. I believe that God's going to be disappointed in you and disappointed in me. And one of the reasons that I've chosen to submit to my sensei, my spiritual leader, the guy that you're about to hear from, is he's a guy that scores points in all of the events.
Yeah.
You know, he's not a guy that I believe is the best in the world at 5 of the 10 events, but I believe that he gets the maximum out of what God has given him, and he scores points in all events. And so I know a lot of like successful gurus or guys out there that claim to be great at leadership, and they really do know leadership well. But how much have they allowed that theory to take root in their life and transform who they are, that allows them the ability to create an atmosphere that transform those around them? I've just never met anybody that scores points like Pastor Keith scores points, so he's not perfect, but you score a lot of points, man, and you really do a lot with what God has given you. And so before I give you the mic, I would love to introduce his son, a guy that's become one of my dearest friends, and him and I have done Man Academy together. So if you guys have seen that on social media, he's my cohort in that, and he's the guy that really brings a lot of spiritual wisdom, a lot of spiritual maturity, because at the end of the day, you guys watch this show and you see me be on fire for Jesus, but understand, like, man, I'm really like 5 years in on this. You know, so if you look at my pro career, I really didn't feel like I was like a real veteran until I was in there for like 8 or 10 years. And then I decided that once I hit that point, I knew that there was nothing left in that career. Well, spiritually, I'm in my 5th year. So I absolutely have a lot of room for growth. But that's why I choose to spend time and collaborate and align myself with people who are great where I need to grow. So Joshua is great where I need to grow, and
you're great. You're great where I need to grow.
Yeah.
You helped me a lot physically.
Yeah, well,
this year in my life, and I'm just grateful to get to spend any kind of time with you.
Yeah, so thanks for saying that, man. I love you a lot.
True.
I'm glad that I get to do life with you. I get better when I'm around you, man.
Me too, man. I feel the same about you.
Yeah, so good. And then last but not least, everybody knows Piercy Baby, the Big Show.
Big Show.
The Big Show.
He's really here to make sure that we all stay in line, because some freaking jungle beasts in here, Pastor.
Oh,
You know what I mean? Some jungle beasts. So as Pastor Keith and I
some
were sitting here,
barbarian activity.
and we were thinking about, because I could ask, guys, listen, I could ask Pastor Keith literally, I know 20 questions right now that I could ask him, and he could speak and teach for 45 minutes. And I truly believe it would be something that you would need to rewind and watch 3 times to be able to get all of the meat out of it. So we could take this a lot of directions, but the fact that we have Joshua here, I want to honor you, but I also want you to set some context for the people that are listening. Joshua's 35 years old. He's the pastor of the church that Pastor Keith launched 22 years ago. I think we're coming up on that anniversary. And so you're pretty much the CEO of the church, but he's also an author. But you're not off doing your own thing. And the reason that I say those things is Joshua is one of those rare guys who has like a really great, shiny, far advancing, really big vision father. And a lot of people are intimidated by that. And a lot of people feel their need as a son to go out and prove themselves. But man, the closer that I get to your father and the closer that I become to you, the more that I really see your dad's visions and dreams being something that you place over yours. But it's really, I've watched it enrich your life, and I've watched it promote you forward. So you shared a story with me about a guy named Otto Mears and how he was a guy that had vision, but his vision really didn't impact people in a supernatural way until he had somebody that said yes to his vision that came after him. So would you share that story kind of for context? And then I would love for Pastor Keith to speak on what's required to be an Otto Mears.
Yeah, I think, one of the things I've realized in my life is 23 years, coming up on 23 years at the church. And, the cool thing is me and my dad get to do that together. So I pastor there, but I pastor with him. And I'm just like, someone asked me this week, they're like, what do you do? Like, what's your job? I'm like, man, I'm just my dad's guy. I'm his guy.
Yeah.
So I'm his make it happen guy. I'm like, I help with the business stuff that he does. I help lead our church. I speak as much as he wants me to speak. I don't speak as much as he doesn't want me to speak. And so a lot of people I think are, a little bit, I guess, astounded by that or confused by that because they don't have that, And for most of us, the road in front of us is like paved with disappointment or disillusionment or dysfunction, like we don't have people. And like I've had people my whole life come up to me and go, man, like you just got to really be about your own thing. Like you're good enough to do your own thing, which is what most people do.
Yeah, because they have to.
Because they have to. And I'm second generation, so what I get to be the product of is a person who's really like blazed the trail, and I just get to participate in that. I get to be a part of that world, and it's so radically different than what a lot of people see, and so it can feel like, well, that's in some way flawed, or I'm not living up to my best and highest potential,
or you don't have real balls because you're not going for it.
Yeah, because you're just like a part of this family thing, and you're just getting benefits from that. Like I've had my own price to pay. It's been a different price. Like I would say the price I've had to pay is I don't have the vision for our family. I don't have the vision for what this looks like in the future. And I think we can talk about that. But one of the stories that I love, well, first in the Bible, a lot of people look at Abraham and they look at in the book of Genesis, the Bible says that God told Abraham to leave your country and go, and God made a promise to him. This is the first recorded time in history where God made a promise to Abraham. And that was in Genesis 12. But one of the things I've always found interesting is if you read the chapter before that, Abraham's dad was named Terah. And so God said, I want you to go. God said to Abraham in Genesis 12, he said, I want you to go into the promised land, the land of Canaan. And when we read that story, we go, oh, well, God just spoke to him and told him to go to a new place. When in Genesis chapter 11, what actually happened was Abraham's dad wanted to travel there. And they stopped for whatever reason. We don't know why they stopped, but they stopped in a certain place. And then God basically says to Abraham in Genesis 12, he says, finish your dad's journey. finish the journey that your dad started. And when we look at Scripture, when we look at how God ordains things, I feel like, and we've always felt this way, that God wants to work generationally. So a lot of you that are listening to this, right, you're probably the first person. You're the one in your family that's made a stand. You're the one that's breaking the cycle. And so God intends for that to be something that you don't go back to that now, right? You step into a promised land. And that happens progressively over a long period of time because of how God chooses to think about us. And because God doesn't work like just in our lifetime, he works generationally. And so the story that I love to tell that I feel like really illustrates this really well is in Durango, around Durango, Colorado, there's a highway called 550, and it runs 70 miles from the city of Durango to a city called Ouray. And if you've ever been on this road, it's really cool because there's really no guardrails, and there's no shoulders, and it's this winding mountain road that weaves all the way through the mountains. They call it the San Juan Skyway, but it has two bigger names. One is the Highway to Hell, and the other one is the $1 Million Highway. And
in America, it's the sixth
dangerous.
the sixth best motorcycle ride.
Yeah.
In all of America.
Yeah, and so there's an explorer named John Fremont, and he called this whole stretch of mountains, he called it the highest, most rugged, most impracticable, and inaccessible of all the Colorado Rockies. So the only reason why there's any roads up there is money. There's no reason to put a road up in these like inaccessible mountains. It's estimated that over $1 billion worth of metal and materials have been produced by the mines and towns along this highway. So it takes a lot of work to pull the ore out of a mountain. And the prospectors, the people that were getting all this like metals and materials, they were getting all this stuff out of the mountain, they started to realize it actually cost them more to get it down off the mountain than it did to get it out of the mountain. And so in 1883, this guy, Otto Mears, he started to build pack trails, stage roads, and railroad tracks leading between these cities and even up into the mountains. And there's one particular stretch from a city called Ironton, and the road drops 2,000 feet in a 6-mile stretch of road. And that maybe sounds like a lot to you if you understand engineering. If you don't, like me, I'll explain it. If you ask an engineer today, they would tell you that a road like that is exceedingly difficult to create, even using modern-day tools. And these dudes did this in the 1800s. They estimate that this road, this little stretch of road that's 6 miles long that drops 2,000 feet, they estimate that it cost $1,000 per foot in today's money just to build this one stretch of road. So the 6-mile stretch of road would cost $32 million just to build this little road. So many people assert that Otto Mears spent $1 million per mile in 1880s money to build the first highway in the San Juan Mountains. That comes close to $2 billion in today's money. The first motor car drove on the highway in 1911, and by 1935, 53 years after its construction started, the entire road was paved. So the reason why I like that story is because these guys all found themselves at a place where the road that they were on had come to an end, and it was time for them to blaze a new trail. And that's a lot of the place that we find ourselves in, where we come to the end of a certain road. We're like, hey, I got to start my own thing, or I got to do whatever my thing is. And so we start to blaze a new trail. Well, someone had to come behind the person who blazed the trail and say, hey, I'm going to turn this into a highway that a bunch of people can drive on. Because if Otto Mears wouldn't have done that, if he wouldn't have built roads up there, we wouldn't be able to go up there and drive ourselves. It wouldn't be the 6th best motorcycle, road in America. It wouldn't be like Ouray. The city Ouray is called America's Switzerland, right? It's like all these beautiful towns, these 360-degree mountain views, 100-foot waterfalls, all this stuff. No one would be able to really see that if these guys hadn't come behind the trailblazer and built a highway. And so when I read that story, one of the things it confirmed in me is I feel like my dad's such a trailblazer. He's the first one in his family. He's really the first one in his family to graduate from college, first one in his family to be in ministry, first one in his family to do a lot of stuff. So he's the one in that regard. But then my job is so he's blazing a trail. Then my job is to come behind him and turn that into a highway for my kids, for as many people as possible that are in my world. And that's the role that I get to play in his life. And that's really how it should work in our lives, is that we have leaders that we can follow that are blazing a trail. And then we get the opportunity to build a highway behind them. And then one day, when that trail comes to an end, we get to continue to blaze our own trail forward. But too many people, it's like there's this never ending cycle of just starting over. So that, like this person in front of me was a bad leader, they're a bad father, so I'm going to start all over again. And then they put their kids in a position where their kids have to start all over again. I mean, me and you have a friend, his name's, we call him John Zilla. And John Zilla was, his dad started a top 5 hedge fund, right, in the world. And his dad said he would never hire him, right, because, well, I didn't build this for you. You got to go out and build your own thing. And that stuff makes no sense to me, right, not because, hey, I should just be entitled to, being like a spoiled person. But whatever you build, like if you think about, you should, right, whatever you build, that should endure beyond your lifetime. And what would that look like in order for that to happen?
Yeah, man, I want to be the guy that's in heaven. And because of maybe the books that I've created or the podcasts that I've been on or things that I were a part of, people are still coming to Jesus even after I'm gone. But what I'm hearing you say is I had a father that was a trailblazer. I had a father that did things differently than his father did before. And instead of me taking the uniqueness of who I am and what I'm capable of doing, I decided to double down on what my dad's calling is, and I'm receiving favor because of it. But what would you say to the people that are watching or listening to this that don't have a dad like you have? Like how can they either become that trailblazer, or how can they become the beneficiary of somebody who's not maybe their father of origin?
Yeah, I think one of the things we talk about all the time is core values, right? You got to, one of the things my dad says, who's sitting right here, is you got to, when in life, when you decide what matters most in life, you can live a life that most matters. And everyone's trying to figure out what meaning looks like, and meaning and purpose, and what's your highest use, and what does fulfillment look like. And when you decide what matters most to you. So in my family, right? So again, it's kind of a template. In my family, my dad sat down with us when we were kids, and we had family core values. He said, this is what it means. Our last name's Craft. This is what it means to be a Craft. Like you've done the same with your family, right? There's a Weatherford way. There's a Craft way that we approach life. Like I have 2 daughters, they're 5 and 2, and I'm raising them with the same core values. So those 4 core values are honor, positive attitude, generosity, and excellence. And there's a 5th one, it's leadership. And when you do those 4 things, honor, positive attitude, generosity, and excellence, when you do those 4 things well, you become an excellent leader. And so the first thing I would do, there's so many things you can do, right? But the first thing I would do is I would say, I would encourage you to live a core values-based life. Like don't just have them, don't just write them down. Don't just go through some kind of system of core value setting, but go, how can I operationalize this? How can I put this in my life and implement it? Because that's what I saw in him growing up. I mean, the reason we can have the relationship that we have today is because of the kind of man that he is. Like you said it before we started recording, but it's true that he's very easy to follow, right? Because he's followable. And that's the problem that most of us have with people that we've had to go blaze our own trail, is because like there's just people that we don't feel like we can follow. And so be a followable person. And that all starts, there's so many other things you can get into, but that all starts with core values and deciding what matters most in your life. And then the second thing I would say, so that's the first thing, is you got to be the one that changes what it means to be your last name, whoever you are, whatever your business is. Like if you're in some kind of world that it all looks a certain way, like let's say you're in like some kind of world that's like the financial world, it's like kind of full of endemic fraud. Like you be the one that's not, and then you blaze a new trail by choosing what matters most, by choosing to live life by core values. And then the second answer to your question for me is what I've had to learn how to do in my life, having not just a great man in my dad, because the father and son thing is true, but having great leaders in my life is the greatest test that you can pass with them is the submission test. It's like there's 2 things I would say, and then we can move on. So the first thing is the original sin in the Garden of Eden, right? If you think about Adam and Eve, what's original sin? The Bible, sometimes we paint this picture like, well, they ate this fruit and they gained the knowledge of good and evil, and they gained the power to do bad, and that's what the original sin was. No, the original sin was God said, I want you to submit to me and do what I tell you to do. And then they chose not to, right? So original sin is when we choose not to submit to leadership or authority in our life, right? And we always find ourselves on the outs whenever we do that. Like you get cut from teams, you get fired from jobs, people leave your life because you can't submit. Well, then you have Jesus, right? And this has like been probably the hardest test for me in terms of following a great person and following someone in general is you have to learn how to really submit like yourself. So Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's getting ready to go to the cross, and he, is praying, and he's so, stressed out or whatever that he's sweating blood, right? I've never had a decision in my life that was that intense, but he's like so just distraught about all this that he's sweating blood. And he says to his dad, says to God, he says, not my will, but yours be done. So if this cup can pass me, if we can do this any other way, let's do it. But I'll do it your way, not my way. And when you read the New Testament, when you read about Jesus, Jesus said so many times, especially in the book of John, I don't do a thing unless my Father in heaven tells me to do it. And I don't say a thing unless my Father in heaven tells me to say it. And that's what submission looks like. So that's been probably the hardest thing for me. And if you have a great person in your life that you have the opportunity to follow, or you have the opportunity to get behind them, the best thing that you can do is just be fully submitted to how they lead you and how they are. And it's not about them being perfect or you seeing them as like this person who has no flaws, who has no issues, but it's about being the kind of person that says, hey, it's not about my way. I like what I know, and what matters most to me is me having the right kind of relationship with people in my life more than like being right. We've all heard that a lot. Like, do you value being right, or do you value being in right relationship? Well, with my dad, working with him, serving with him, there couldn't be two more opposite people on the planet, but I value this amazing relationship I have with him more than I value my opinions or my ego or whatever. So I know those are long answers, but I usually give long answers.
No, yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is the first thing is live a core values-based life. And really what living a core values-based life has done for me, and this is what you say, Pastor Keith, like our assignment is to give men something to respect and God something to work with, right? Like, well, what would you need to be in order to give God something to work with? A man of character, right? And like, what's going to give other men something to respect? A man of character. Yeah. So it's pretty simple, but you can't be a man of character until you're a man of core values, right? And then the second thing is like when you find someone who's willing to speak into your life, like, don't be an asshole, right? Yeah. Don't be the guy that asks a question, then doesn't apply the wisdom, because that's not.
Yeah, I think, if I could just summarize it with one thing, I think it's just you learn how to serve that person. Yeah. So if you find a great mentor, if you find a great coach, if you find someone who really is blazing a trail that you want to get in their draft, the question is not how can I be around this person? Like you've got a lot of people that want to be in your world and all of that. The people that you value most as a leader are people who really come alongside you and make happen what's most important to you. So the way I would say it is just in a really concise way, is that you find a way to serve that person, like in your heart, and it'll work. It'll work out, especially when you're coming alongside them, or you want them to coach you or mentor you.
Well, and here's why. Because if you choose to be a beneficiary of somebody's greatness, you become a benefactor to somebody else. But if you can't benefit from somebody's greatness, then you're not going to ever become a benefactor. You're not going to become somebody. So why would you serve somebody? What do you mean come alongside serve somebody? Why would you honor somebody? Why would you do that? Because as you become the beneficiary of their greatness, you get to be put in a position where now you can bestow on other people what has been bestowed on you. And so that's what's so powerful. But anyway, I wanted to address your question, is there anything else with that?
I was going to say, like, I think you learn, and great thinkers kind of have all shared this in their own way, in that the best way to become a valuable person is to learn how to add value to other people. And I think in a mentor coaching relationship, in a serving relationship, in a working for someone relationship, like a lot of people go to let's say you work a W-2 job. You go to your job and you think, man, how can I be more valued here? Right? And that's like such a default, natural human thought process. The better and so like we do that with mentors too. We're like, how can I get this person to see me as like great? And how can I get this person to invest more of their time with me? The real question is, how can I add value to this person? Or how can I add value to this place? So if you're working at a job and you want to get paid more, right? The question you should ask yourself is, how can I add value here? Because one of the things my dad's taught, right, is that the more value you add, the more you become valuable. And it's the same way serving somebody. It's like whether it's working a job, being in a marriage, whatever in kind of relationship environment that you have. If I decide in myself, if I say to myself, I see this person as valuable to me. What I want to do is I want to let them know how much they're valuable to me by taking the best part of me and giving that to them, like giving them my value. Like, I value you, so I'm going to invest myself into you and enhance your value. Well, then I become valuable to that person, you know? And so I think that whether you call it serving, whether you call it adding value, there's people in your life right now that you know that you could add significant value to their life. And by doing that, you become supremely valuable to them. So at 35 in this season of my life with my dad, I have learned how to serve him. I've decided in my heart, my job, my responsibility is to add value to him. So whatever I have to bring, whatever I have to offer, there's a lot I do for him that, you know, he could have someone else do, he could pay someone else to do whatever. There's a lot that I do for him that I feel like is me adding my best, like adding my value to him as a leader. And then what happens is, like, man, he said this to me the other day. I'll tell this one story and then, you know, we'll move on. So like 10 years ago when Russell Wilson won the Super Bowl with the Seahawks, he's like a year older than me, but we were the same age at the time. So we were both 25. So my dad called me and he said, hey, you know, Russell Wilson just won the Super Bowl MVP. And I said, yes, sir. And he goes, well, you're not my MVP right now. He's like, I want you to become my MVP, but I'm just waiting on you to mature. And so 10 years later, we had a really great conversation today. And he said, hey, you're becoming my MVP, you know, because I've decided that I'm going to add value to him. I'm going to add my value to him, not wait to be valued by him.
So I'm hearing very clearly what you're saying about what it is to be a son, to choose a father or to choose a vision that's bigger than you. Now, my question for you is, because I know that you've had to make some changes to how you connect with him or grow with him when you guys were growing up. So how did you shift and change? Because you were a man that was leading hundreds, thousands of men through ministry, through business coaching, traveling all over the world doing what you do, but it was hard for you to get your son to say yes to your lifestyle. So what did you have to shift and change in order for him to say yes?
Well, let me say, first of all, it's an honor to be with you, Steve.
Love you, man. So glad you're clear.
Just glad that God's given you the platform, the influence that he's given you, and you realize it's to glorify him and to live with the transcendent cause. So thank you for being you and for being the son of God first, but then also choosing to be a spiritual son in my life, choosing me to be your spiritual father. And what you honor is what you attract. That's what a lot of people don't realize. What you honor is what you attract. So when you honor somebody or when you honor something, you attract that into your life. So the thing, before I answer that question, so keep that question in mind. I want to answer a question that you asked Josh. And the question you asked Josh is, what if somebody didn't have a father like that? You know. So yes, core values. They've got to establish their own core values. They've got to. There is a path for you. But here's what happened. It goes. Josh mentioned it. It goes all the way back into the Garden of Eden, which was the original sin, right? So the enemy came, and the way he tempted Adam and Eve was, first of all, he said, "Hey, did God?" He said something that God didn't say. So that's part of how the enemy tempts you, because he twists stuff. So has God indeed said, "You shall not eat of every tree of the garden"? And the woman said, "Well, no, we may eat of the trees of the garden." So now she's in a thought process with the enemy. Okay. So he's asking a question, but he's not really asking a question. And I want to get to that in a minute. And she goes, but it's just the fruit of the tree in which God has said is in the midst of the garden. He said, "You shall not eat of that." And the serpent said, "You will not die. For God knows in the day that you eat it, your eyes will be open, and you'll just know the difference between good and evil." So here's what happens. The devil does not want you to be a person that asks questions to learn. He just wants you to be a questioning person. So let me explain. So what he was doing is he wasn't asking a question of Eve because he wanted Eve's answer. He had a questioning spirit.
You want to bring doubt.
To bring doubt. So here's what happens. Here's what's happened in our world today. This is real. Because fathers haven't taken their place, because men haven't taken their place. And by the way, the questioning was not happening with Adam, it was happening with Eve. Because Adam hadn't taken his place with Eve. So now the enemy has the ability to bring a questioning spirit to Eve. And so she's thinking he's answering her question, but that's what she's thinking. I'm answering his question. Well, no, God didn't say that. He just said there's one tree that we're supposed to not eat of. It's a tree of knowledge of good and evil. And the devil lies. You're not going to die. God just knows. He didn't want you to eat that because he knows you'll be like him. You'll know the power. You'll be like him. And so this is the temptation that people don't even realize. The temptation of the enemy, original sin, was to get you into a position where you're questioning God, your Father. Therefore, you question everything. So what happens to somebody who doesn't have a father? So I want to speak to all the men for just a second. If you don't take your place, if you don't strive to lead a life that glorifies God, your son especially, but your sons and your daughters will, because of the original sin, question your authority. You're not going to be an authority in your children's life because you're their father or their mother. You're going to be an authority. You're going to be an authority or not an authority in your children's life based on how you live that gives them something to respect. So where a lot of young people have a problem with their parents, first of all, is the dad's not there. That's the first problem. The second problem is, well, then it causes them to question everything. Well, I guess like y'all were supposed to be together and you're not together. So, wow, how does that work? Or maybe your dad was never around, or maybe you weren't wanted and you were adopted. There's all these questions. Why didn't somebody want me? Why didn't my dad here? Why couldn't my mom and dad work it out? So now, years, I'm talking about sometimes 10 or 15 or 20 years before somebody gets married, they're already questioning marriage because they haven't seen it work for their parents. So then why should I get married? It didn't work for my parents. So what the enemy, what I really want everybody to understand is, and what I want, especially the men, is are you the kind of man that lives your life in such a way that your life answers your son and daughter's questions just because of the way you live? Or are you living your life in such a way that you're causing a questioning spirit to come into your children, that they're going to question everything, and therefore they're not going to even know authority when they see it because they question everything. It's different. It's different to ask a question because you genuinely want an answer. It's another thing just to question everything. So what's happening in our world today? We know that leaders are lying. We know there's all kind of fraud. We know there's all kind of stuff that's in our world today. We see such a lack of leadership. And what does it cause to happen to everybody? We question authority. I mean, honestly, before COVID, I never questioned doctors, except when I had a heart attack, because I had some knowledge. And when my doctor said after I have a heart attack, we've got to prescribe 3 medicines to you: heart medicine, blood thinners, and statins. Well, I'd done my own research. Like even before I had a heart attack, I was never going to take a statin, no matter what. I said, I'm not taking a statin. He said, well, I'm glad you said that because I wouldn't either. I go, then why are you telling me to do it? He said, because we're required to.
Yeah.
Wow.
All of a sudden, so if somebody has a heart attack, doctors are required to prescribe those 3 things so they're not held liable. And so it's according to all their rules, HIPAA, all that stuff. So it was like, that was the first time I went, man, I really
Caused you to question.
I need to like know my stuff, but that's what happens when there is either structures, systems in place that are more about the system than they are about the relationship.
And I think it's like a thought pattern, thing like you're talking about, where when what you say and what you do are different things. Yeah. You create questioning.
You cause
people.
questioning.
It's like you used to tell that story about your dad. I mean, I know a lot of people listening had parents like that were like, hey, do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
My dad would tell me that, and I would look him in the face before I was a teenager and go, you know that doesn't work, right? Like he'd just look at me. He was shocked. I go, that doesn't work. Dad, I'm going to do the right thing because I love God, but I would tell him, I said, don't ever tell me, do as I say, not as I do. He's like, okay. Well, why? Because God gave me some wisdom when I was early. I'm not saying it about me. I'm not saying I'm trying to disrespect my father. I'm just saying that is not giving me something to respect. To go, do as I say and not as I do. If I've got a beer in my hand, I don't care how young your children are, and you don't want your kids to drink until maybe they get of age or whatever, but you're doing it, and you go, oh, you can't do this. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't set well. It's good for me, but it's not good for you. It causes, it's why? That's the question, right? Why? So if you live in such a way where you become that type of man, you become that type of father, first of all, your lifestyle is the answer to their question. You know, your son doesn't have to go, hey, Dad, how are you the fittest man in the NFL? He didn't have to ask that. He's seen your life.
Yeah, you still look like the fittest man in the NFL.
But
turning 40 years old
absolutely.
today, baby. Come on, possibility.
So he's been given an example. Now, guess what he can do? He can ask questions about how he can get there. Mm-hmm. So again, he's seen you do it. He's seen you get. So he doesn't question that you can't get there. So a lot of people in their life, because they have nobody in their life that's been any kind of example, what happens on the inside of them? They don't think their dreams can come true.
Well, that's the thing about that you started to cut in on this, but I think you'll like this direction because this is how I've always thought of you. Like, if you don't know the backstory, Pastor Keith came into my life via Strike Force and Power Team, busting bricks and bending bars. And when I saw him, I saw possibility. Like, I'm like, whoa, a Christian can be strong. He can be bold. He can speak things into existence. And so at that point, I received Jesus 25 years later. I hadn't seen him since that moment. He came back into my life, but he represented possibility at that stage of life as well, which was that's really what attracted me into your life. Wasn't the fact that you had big arms and you were really fit, because guess what? 25 years later, so am I, man, you know? Yeah. And it wasn't just that you had made millions of dollars, because I've made millions of dollars. It was the fact that your marriage was producing the fruit that it was. It was the fact that your son was standing alongside of you, and that was the fruit that really attracted me into your life. And when I talked about you being a decathlete of life, you were scoring points with your son since the moment that I saw you all the way through, right? Like, I could tell that you had stacked things. And so I knew that you had philosophies, and I knew that you had standards that you were living by, that I felt like I could get under, that I could learn from, that I could submit to. And the backstory is Pastor Keith coached me for 9 months via Zoom, and anything he said cut off, I cut it off. Anything he said start doing, I started doing. And as I began to get acceleration in my life through one-on-one coaching, I began to create more fruit in the areas that I hadn't created fruit. Right. Then my wife is like, wait a minute, I'm seeing this dude transform in a way that I haven't seen him transform, like not just, oh, it's a New Year's resolution type of thing. He's transforming. Yeah. And so I say those things to say, what is available to people in regards to how do they grow from someone like you in their own life? What do they look for to be the beneficiary, so they can go out to be the benefactor? Because I believe through my mentorship with you, so many people are getting to be the benefactor of it, because you and I are not just talking for me to understand your theory. We're talking so I can achieve transformation and produce fruit in the areas that I see you producing fruit. Yeah, and that's what's so powerful about you, Steve. That's why you've fast-tracked. In 5 years, you've accomplished what more people than what a lot of people could accomplish in 50 years. Why? Because we've had some hard talks. We haven't always had easy talks. Mm-hmm. Like, there was a time when you were having to let somebody in your organization go because of an alcohol problem. Mm-hmm. And so I looked at you and I said, you know what? You really need to consider stop drinking. Mm-hmm. Why? Because the people around you may be okay for you, and you don't even know what's in their past, or you don't know your influence. That's why I don't drink. I don't drink because I think you're going to hell. I don't drink because, number one, I don't want to put myself in any situation where I lose control and where the enemy could gain some kind of foothold. That's number one. But number two, I want to try to exemplify the way that I live, right? So alcohol is just one thing. But anyway, with dipping, the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so the way I see you, the way I saw you as a son of choice is there's so much excellent about you. Remove whatever's normal. Mm-hmm. Drinking is normal. I want to say it to everybody that's in your audience. Drinking is normal. Everybody drinks. Hey, let's go out for a drink. It's normal. Do you want to be a normal person? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, so I'm not here to say anti-alcohol. I'm just saying it's like dipping, drinking, all the stuff that normal men do. It's like it's a standard. It becomes a standard of you're not doing it because you're going to go to hell because you think you're better than somebody, but you're better than that. Yeah, you said, I think it was your quote that said, what you do in moderation, your followers will do in excess.
Yeah, potentially, yes.
Yeah, so for me, that really made sense. And when Pastor Keith said, hey, man, listen, if there's people that you're leading, that are struggling with alcohol. And even though you have like a drink per month, that really gives them permission to have a drink when they want.
Yeah.
And so,
and you're see, the difference in you is you're disciplined, but at the same time you had your own addictions.
I fought battles with it too, but I don't fight them anymore.
But see, so you think about just discipline. So you had the discipline to apply discipline to anything. I call that determinate discipline. But when you open yourself up to certain things, you're having to fight a fight that you don't even need. Now, the discipline will work. Wherever it works here, it'll work there. But if you open up yourself to say, yeah, but, I enjoy this, and you enjoy something that eventually could control you, that's disempowered. That's not empowering. That's disempowered. So, again, we're not just talking about those specific things, but I'm just telling you, when we talk about how you have decided to listen to what I've said and follow that, it's stuff like that too. It's not like just, hey, well, the Lord is good. Yeah, I believe the Lord's good. It's like, why don't you consider like stopping that? Because that doesn't align with the elite person that you are.
If you'll notice what he said, one thing that I've learned, if I could share things with the listener of like, how could you be a better beneficiary? What he just said, Pastor Keith said, why don't you think about? And one thing that I've learned, and this has been, I'm coachable, but I've taken it next level with you. When I was in the NFL and my coach would say, hey, I want you to start to think about this, probably wouldn't pay that much attention because I know my craft better than they know my craft.
Right.
But when you're with somebody that you know is better than you because they've produced the fruit that you want. When they say things like, hey, I want you to start to think about it, the way I hear that is, hey, stop doing this or start doing this. And one thing that you said, I think it was last Mighty Men, was if your spiritual
honor is when you honor a leader in your life. Honor is treating a suggestion like a command.
So
when they say,
by the way, I'd never heard him say that before. That was profound, and that
think about you. So
that impacted a lot of people. Like if somebody.
Well, that's how I am with you. I just heard the words differently. Like when I hear you say, "I want you to start to think about it," that's a command. It's not
because you've been a product of really good coaching too. I mean, it's like there's some people, they live their whole life, and I was a person like I was uncoachable in life. Like my dad would tell you that. My high school basketball coach would tell you that. It's like you don't listen to anything we say. I wasn't good enough either to be uncoachable. Like some people are good enough to be uncoachable. I wasn't. So I lived my whole life being uncoachable, going, man, like why isn't stuff working for me? Because I'm not listening to anything anybody says unless it's forced on me. And number one reason people are uncoachable is insecurity.
So even if you have insecurity in yourselves, put your security in somebody else until you become secure in that area. If they've got fruit. If they don't, then find somebody that does. But I'm just telling you, the number one reason people have an issue with not being coachable is their own insecurity, and a close second is their lack of understanding of spiritual authority. Like if you have a true spiritual authority in your life and you submit to that authority, you will have authority in your life. If you have spiritual authority in your life and you don't submit to that authority, if you're not a great follower, you'll never be a great leader. So if you can just think about that, like if you're too big to follow, you're too small to lead. Like be somebody that says, I'm going to be the best son, the best follower, and guess what? The people that are coming behind you see how you, and that's the secret of Josh's success, even at his age, is people watch him. And that's what I tell him. Every room we go into, I said, son, this is way more about anything I'll say, and obviously way more, or honestly, way more than about you will say. They're going to watch us, and they're going to see how you are with me. That's the message. More than what I'll say, it's how you are as a person.
People need a picture of it, man. They're so tired of hearing the stories, and I'm not saying people don't need to hear the parables, but they need to see a picture of what it looks like right now. Like they need to see a picture of possibility, and we'll all agree that all of us are imperfect and we make mistakes every single day. But what does the picture of possibility look like when somebody has a standard of excellence in every single area? And that's what I believe allows you to score points in all of the events, is you have a standard. Right? Like you're expecting of yourself in every single area, but men can't expect of themselves until they've made commitments and created design to all of the different areas of life, the different events of life. And men haven't created design. They might have 8 designed and then 2 by default, and they end up getting crushed by the competition. So has it always been that way for you? Have you always been a guy that's had standards and rules for every area of life?
It always has been that way.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because it was that way with my father. It was actually the opposite. So I was able to see what it wasn't when I was growing up and say, okay, I know I'm going to make him my teacher, but it's going to be a teacher in a different way, you know? And so that's what I would say. I would say to anybody, what if you don't have a father like that? Or somebody may look at Josh and say, well, I didn't have a father like your dad. Mm-hmm. But the fact is, it wasn't until just a few years ago that Josh decided to fully follow. Mm-hmm. So it had a lot less to do with me and who I was, and a lot more to do with who he was. But at the same time, the way I was helped him to get down the road. Mm-hmm. And what happens to a lot of people is it's not that there's such a great man or a great woman in your life, because there may not be, but that's why family of choice is so powerful. It's more important than origin. Like the family you were born into, you had nothing to do with. You can agree with their philosophy of life and their philosophies of parenting, their marriage, their money, their whatever, or you can just be a learner. The greatest opportunity that every person has is to learn from their family of origin, both how to be and how not to be. Mm-hmm. That's the greatest opportunity we have. Not, well, my dad wasn't this, my mom wasn't this, and they weren't around, and they didn't. And, you know, I'm the way that I am because they weren't there. And all of a sudden now you're a victim rather than say, no, I'm a learner. So I'm going to learn from what my parents were and weren't. And guess what? I may even be skewed in that because of where I am. But the bottom line is, if you're a learner, you can learn from people's good and you can learn from people's bad. And that's how you honor. Mm-hmm. You honor because, hey, you know what? Without those people, I wouldn't have been brought into the world. Yeah. You know, but you can, what I want every man especially to hear, but also the women, you can choose who your spiritual father and spiritual mother voices are in your life. And what is that language? That's Bible language, because the Bible says you have 10,000 teachers but few fathers. So you can choose who has more than one father, anybody that decides to. That's what Robert Kiyosaki taught in the financial world. He had a rich dad, he had a poor dad. Yeah. Well, guess what? He chose, and he doesn't use this language, but this is what Robert Kiyosaki did. He chose to be the beneficiary of his rich dad. And he didn't despise his poor dad. He was just very grateful he had a rich dad that helped open him up to becoming a wealthy individual.
Yeah, and I think that's like the way I define that for me is the person in your life that's different than a coach, different than a teacher. The person that's like a father or a mother voice in your life is the person that you imitate. It's like Paul says, imitate me. Like, follow me as I follow Christ. Somebody that you want
to imitate.
Yeah, someone that you're aspiring to imitate. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, like, all of us are kind of built to imitate something. And we're imitating, by default, a lot of the wrong things. And that's one of the things I've seen just so much in my life is getting around people that in any area of their life, they have a level of mastery. Like, that's what I was saying about, you know, getting to be around you, Steve, and getting to work out with you and all of that is that, okay, you're a master in this area. I'm not. So I can just get around you and imitate you and do what you do, and then I'll have the results that you have in life.
And because I see the value in your wisdom and your spiritual maturity, serious. When we're sitting in the sauna and I'm stretching and going through all my stuff that I do, I'm just asking you questions, you know, because I know that you've been the beneficiary of him forever. So in a way, it's like I'm hanging out with your dad's wisdom, beginning to build relationship with you, and I'm allowing you to be the beneficiary of my greatness. And to me, like, that's an alignment.
That's how it's supposed to work.
But let me tell you this too, and then Pierce, I want you to say something. But you choosing to honor me and follow me helped him be more honorable and followable. So in other words, when an origin sees a son of choice come along and says, I choose that. So last night I was with a few people, and one of the guys I was with who's been in my life, I was his coach and his corporate coach before I started the church. Hundreds of millions of dollars in an organization. Well, here's what he used to think. Well, you know about that, but I know about this. Rather than just going, hey, I'm going to be the beneficiary of that. So one of the things he was talking about last night is he said, man, some of these newer guys that have come along, like they're like fast track. Like I said, yeah, because they actually buy in. They're not having to work through it. In other words, that questioning spirit
is gone.
Is what really, really, really does hinder people. So my encouragement to everybody, number one, find a spiritual father voice, okay? And this is why I do the masterminds. This is why I do online coaching. This is why I do personal coaching. All the things I'm doing now, $1 million mastermind where somebody has to have a net worth of millions of dollars and has to be bringing in at least $1 million to qualify to be in that room. Why? Because the level of conversation is different. Why? Because I'm that guy too. I'm making millions. And so in other words, I'm not going to create a space in a room where I'm not operating in that space. So I thought, what's it like? Even with our online mastermind, what are we trying to do? I want to at the most reasonable level, I want to try to give people an opportunity to at least hear a voice that can help them, even if we may not do a lot of life together. So my point is, it's more than just establishing a church, but it's establishing what I call an incubator of greatness. And within that incubator of greatness, there's rooms, and no matter where you are, you can choose to be a part of that. So number one, get a spiritual father, spiritual mother voice that you listen to that resonates with you. Doesn't mean you have to do everything they say, but at least it resonates with you, it empowers you, it encourages you, it strengthens you, gives you something to follow. The second thing is to really be somebody that decides you're going to pay your price, because you're going to have to pay your price for your greatness. But if you've got somebody that's paying the price and has paid a price, and you see the greatness that you want, and I always say this, if you honor that, here's the God part. His super gets added to your natural, and you get a part of that honor that you didn't have to pay the same price that they paid for that greatness. That's why you fast track. That's why because you're like wide open. And the only thing that'll ever slow you down is based on what you decide to do and what you decide not to do, how you decide to follow or not follow. So that's with a lot of guys around me for years. They said, we want it. You call it the smoke. We want the smoke, but they're not willing to strike the match.
Yeah, to pay the price.
Yeah, to pay their price. So, Pierce, you were going to say something.
I was just going to tie that.
Hey, Pierce, what do you have for us, man? It's so good to hear your voice, man.
Something to notice. I'm just sitting back taking notes.
Isn't Pierce delightful?
He's wonderful.
But I was just tying that back to how you bring, your wisdom and your learning and what you learned from your dad to the morning. It's a way of you adding value to Steve, right? For the mentorship and the value that he's giving you, right, through the exercise. And that's something that I've found is, going back to what you said, is as you serve people, you're like, they'll start giving you more to learn and more to grow through. So like as I serve Steve longer and better and am more faithful, more things start to open up, more opportunities, more, just in general, your world gets larger and larger. Yeah. So that was something.
It's very powerful. And again, you've tapped into it. You've tapped into it earlier.
Pierce gets it. He gets honor.
You tapped into it earlier than most people tap into it, and you have a reason not to. Like, you have your own personal reasons. There's a family that you were raised in. I know nothing about it. But my point is, everybody has a reason not to. But when your reasons to do something are strong enough, no matter whatever resists you, it won't stop you. Yeah. Because your reasons are stronger than any resistance. So it's very powerful.
Well, I saw a stat like yesterday that said that 3% of Americans are millionaires, right? So it's just like kind of not that big. It seems bigger than I would think, but 3% of Americans are millionaires. And then it made me think, like, Jim Rohn says you're the average of the people you spend the most time with. And it made me think about how a lot of people, they want to be successful, they want to be prosperous, they want to have whatever they want to have in life, but they don't want to get around greatness because of the intimidation of greatness, or they think they're with greatness and the person that they thought was great really wasn't that respectable.
Or they think because they're with that person that they're already that.
That they're already that.
That's the blind spot.
And so I think one of the things that you do that you make it so simple, and this is why we need great alignments. Like Steve and the group that we have of friends is like become some of my best friends this year, because with all due respect to the friends I had before, they weren't winning. Like I'm the one in the group that's like winning the most. I'm like, I don't want this. I want to be.
It makes it when you're the top dog, it makes it feel like you've got to give all of the energy and pull all of the weight. And when you can be around men that are winning in their own way in different areas of life and all bring something individual, but they're excellent, right? They're pursuing excellence in all of those areas. When you get together, it's not a grind to be together. Yeah. It's a grace, and it actually, how many times have we trained in the morning with the 4 or 5 of us where we've walked out and we've felt worse than when we walked in? It doesn't happen, ever.
Yeah, it's like always this level up that's happened that we're benefiting from the greatness of each other. And I think too many people, they aren't in the right rooms. Like, they're not in rooms with people that are great. Yeah. They don't pursue coaching. They don't pursue fathering, mothering, whatever. They don't pursue that. So then they can't ever really level up, because like the way you become a part of that 3% is you get around people in that 3%. You know, and my dad taught, you know, you said this a second ago, but to get to that point, you know, I love how simple you make it, in that you just said, look, it's not about doing everything right. It's just about giving people something to respect. It's about doing enough that's respectable and being that kind of person. But you got to want to be in the right room with other people that are paying their price for their own greatness. I mean,
and you don't get to be in a great room by not paying a price.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be in the great room. And again, Steve, that's one of the reasons I started charging for coaching, because everybody wanted to be around it. But then when it came a price, well, it separated the sheep from the goats.
Yeah.
And the goats are not the good thing in the Bible. You know, a goat is the greatest of all time, but not the separation of the sheep and the goats is people saying, yeah, I want it, but I don't want to pay my price for it. What gives you Godfidence is the price you pay. The Godfidence doesn't come from that person. The Godfidence comes from the price you pay to be in that room, to be with that person, to be around those people. You're paying your own price. That's what gives you Godfidence. Not like, wow, I got to be in that room. No, you paid your price to be in that room.
and then you get to level up just being in there. It's like, I think so much about that for me, like this past year, when I look at it physically for me, it's like I took 2 years off from working out. COVID was a lot of fun. Ate whatever I wanted, didn't do much.
Bless your heart.
Bless my little
and your
heart,
arteries.
Right? And so then when I, you know, one of the things you say, when you get in the right place with the right people at the right time, the right things always happen. So I resolved to get in the right room, you know, at the beginning of this year. And that's helped me level up so much, not just in terms of friendships, but also in terms of coaching and what I benefit from. And when we decide to do that, that's the thing that levels us up, and that's the thing that ultimately makes us, you know, supremely respectable with people.
Yes.
And you had to say yes to it, though.
For sure,
think
to the
about,
price.
Because I was, well, not even to the price, but you had to say yes to the relationship, because just for everybody listening, I pursued Joshua. Like, I called him, I invited him, and maybe there was something going on in his mind. And he was like, well, he only wants to be friends with me because he thinks my dad is just the bee's knees. No, I wanted to be around you because I saw like greatness in you. And I knew that you had a gap that I could fill, right? I knew that you needed an encourager and somebody to just be like, let's go. You're like my wife, man. You're like, once you get going, you're unstoppable because you're just not a quitter, right? But my wife is not a great starter. Right. And I knew there was an area of life where you really needed to get started. Right. And I knew once you got started, like, look at what you've done this year. You've been so faithful to it. You haven't missed a full week in the gym the entire year. Yep. And you're CEO in a massive church. And like you said, you're Jeffrey to dad, you know, like whatever he needs written, whatever he needs done, whatever needs to get across the line.
Well, let me say this too, Steve. I know we're getting close on time, but let me say this. When you moved your whole family to be here with me, you never thought you would get that.
No.
You never thought you would get Josh. So here's what I want to say to everybody. When you hear me talk about your alignments are more important than your assignments, but then once you get that revelation, your alignments begin to determine your assignments. And all of a sudden, you get these benefits that you didn't ever know that you would have. Now, you and I are always going to be close. Like, I'm going to always be a spiritual father in your life. But I'm 23 years older, right? 23. So there's a certain level of life we'll do together. But Josh and you are in the same like age, same
daddy-daughter dates together,
yeah,
man.
No, absolutely. So what happened is you aligned with me. You didn't even know that you were going to get that. And that's what I want to say to everybody. Like, when you get your alignments right, what's so powerful is you get so much more than that person you thought you were aligning with. You get everything that is good that makes them who they are based on who and what they're aligned with.
Yeah. And I think how much you get depends on the price you pay. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
My wife was 7.5 months pregnant. I got 4 businesses. I had an awesome church. And man, I love Elevate Life. Awaken's awesome too.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't like, oh, I'm leaving California because my church sucks and I'm not making money and I don't have any friends and I'm not in shape and it's not sunny. All of those things, I'm checking all of those boxes, right? But I knew that God had more for me, and I knew that moving here would at least allow me to confirm what I feel like God's voice is. But this is always what I told myself. I'm going to take action right now. In 2 years from now, if God says, or if I realize I'm wrong, I could move back to California, right? But I'm an action guy. And so it's been about 18 months later, man, and I feel like every single area of my life that I was believing for growth that had maybe been stuck, those areas are moving. It wasn't the easiest year, but there was a price to pay. And my point to mentioning those things is there are so many bonuses that I wasn't necessarily expecting for.
And I would say that to everybody.
But it's the
That's what
price I
say.
paid, you know?
It's the price you pay. And again, the alignments that you make, which you're going to pay a price for those alignments. If you decide you're going to get married, there's going to be a big price, you know, on and on and on. But anyway, Steve, I just want to honor you and just say that thank you for being how you are, who you are, for being somebody that, because you're a great follower, because you're a great student, because you're a lifelong learner, then you do have credibility with people. Why? Because you're following well, so you're going to lead well. And that is just, it's just so rare. It's so rare. So thank you for being that kind of person. Thank you for being a friend to Josh, and you genuinely loving him, and him genuinely loving you, and for really the influence that you're having that way transcends you being, you know, people are first attracted because you're a Super Bowl champion, blah, 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 blah. But when you peel that stuff back, who you are and who you're becoming is a wonderful, powerful man of God that now as your alignments are coming into congruence with your core values. And that's what has to happen. You know, just the sky's the limit. You know, so
Thank you for saying that. And I feel like for people that are listening to this and they're like, man, like it sounds like a lot has happened really fast for you in your life in these last like 2.5 years. I feel like when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, you know, and I was really pursuing Christ hard. Like I didn't know what I was doing, but I was pursuing him hard. I was doing my best to like take my family to church and try to figure this whole thing out. And I was stuck in religion, but it wasn't until I found someone who valued, and this is what I want people to hear, who value what I valued and then also had the fruit that I desired. And I think that's a really important thing for people to hear me when I say this is, do they value what you value and have they produced the fruit in the areas that matter to you? Right. And if that is the case, what do you need to do? How do you need to serve them to get into their life, or what price do you need to pay to get into their life? And for me, it didn't require me to move across the country. You were already coaching me, but I believe that there's proximity and power. Yep. And I just believe things were going to shift in an even greater way when I got into your church, when I got into your world. Because since I've moved here, I haven't really spent that much more time with you. I'm in your masterminds. Right. I do one-on-one coaching. Yep. And my point is I believe some of the greatest lessons in life.
You're in the incubator.
I get to catch him though. Right. Like part of the best part is being able to get around him, because I can ask him all of the questions of what was it like when you were 15? My son's 15. Mm-hmm. So if I want my son to choose me like he has chosen you, I need to become what you've become, and I need to have the wisdom and the experience of what's required. So the reason that I say that is I know that you're launching a new mastermind that nobody knows about. So I would love for you to talk to them about who would this be for. You mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I know that this is something that you're
there's multiple masterminds, but there's the one we're focusing on really is online, because it's something, no matter where you are, you can be a part of that. And I know you have your own great online mastermind, but it's just having that voice, having that, you know, and my particular mastermind, online mastermind, is going to focus on something different than all my other masterminds. And that is, we're always going to be focused on a growth mindset. So I think when you grow better, everything around you grows better. I think that everybody has the superpower to grow, but you have to learn how to have a growth mindset to make that happen. So we're going to always focus on that in the online mastermind. And then the only other mastermind that's new, you know, we've got elite couples mastermind, we've got elite masterminds, which are higher level people, but then the $1 million mastermind that I mentioned is that I just want to have a room where we can have a conversation with people who are on the same plane and the same level financially, or, you know, working towards that. So those are the two main things. And so with our when, like, let's see, like this podcast will be, we're recording it, but when will we when will
It'll
it?
probably be before the end of the year.
Yeah, so before the end of the year.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's ask Pierce. He's the boss. I
Yeah.
just talk.
Yeah. So if we're thinking about the end of
In December.
in the end of 2022, going into 2023, one of the things that we're doing in December is we're making what is $250 a month, $99 a month for the online, and then I'm even doing something further than that. And that is, if somebody will just do $1,000 for the year, and they'll do that up front, then they save another $200. So it's already a 60% savings, but then it's another if they just say, hey,
2 months for free.
yeah, they get 2 more months for free. So why am I doing that? Because I want to add value to people. And I think it'll prove to be value. A lot of people that are in fact, Patrick Clark, who's I know one of your mentors and
I'm
best
calling
friends.
it when this show is over.
Yeah, so Patrick is a part of my online mastermind, as well as being involved with other things that I'm doing as well. So there's people that are involved in multiple things, but that online mastermind is just something where I really give impartation that does some quick shifts. But anything?
No, I was going to say, I think what's really cool sitting in here is one of the things my dad says, that you've said that, we all say is like, you need 3 great relationships in your life. You need a Paul, who's a mentor or father to you. You need a Barnabas, who's a friend to you, and you need a Timothy, who you're mentoring. And that would be my encouragement practically to everybody that's listening to this. Like, who's your Paul? Who's really your life leader? Who's a person, like we have relationship with God, we pursue him. But who's a person in your life who's a real great father voice in your life? And you have my dad sitting here, which is cool. And then the second question is, who's a friend? Who's friends that you're going through life with? And we have this really great Barnabas relationship, and then we have Piercy baby sitting here, who's a Timothy to you.
Timmy. For both of us, though, man.
I know.
We coach him once a month, both together.
Yeah, Pierce generously thinks I can help him, And so this podcast, just us sitting here, represents those 3 great relationships that you have that, like you're talking about leveling up, that just getting in those right alignments. And if you're listening to this and you're not sure where to start, the place to start is, hey, find a great father voice in your life. Find someone who can coach you really well. Then go, hey, who's my best friend? Who am I doing life with that, like, we hold each other up and we encourage each other and we're getting better together, right? And then who's a person that's coming alongside me that I can mentor and pour into?
So what you're hearing Pastor Keith say is he's giving you an opportunity one time per month for him to speak into your life, for him to shift how you think. And that's essentially what I get from him. And I pay a whole lot more money than $99 per month. And so I'm just encouraging you. You can't be the beneficiary of something that you don't invest into and that you don't honor, right? Because that's what honor is. So I couldn't encourage that more, because that's where I'm being led by. So this is me bringing you to the person that's leading me. And if you don't have a spiritual father voice in your life, I think the best one is the one that I have, and that's why he's mine. So,
And where can people get it?
KeithCraft.org.
And we'll put the link in the show notes. So
I just wanted to announce that.
KeithCraft.org. And then Joshua, I know that you don't love promoting the stuff that you do, but one of the greatest things about you is how you think, and really the philosophical conversations that you have, and really you help me to give form to a lot of my passion, and you help me to articulate myself better. So where could people go to, because I know that you have a Substack.
Yeah, I have a Substack, wallow.io, WOLOW.io.
What does Wallow stand for?
Wallow is it's like an acronym, way of life to follow. Like, that's how we should live. And I've written 2 books that haven't been published yet, and they're on there. Yeah. So people can go on there and look at some stuff that I'm writing, stuff that I'm putting together. I mean, really, like I said, my heart and my goal is to help build my dad's stuff, especially in this season. So thanks for even wanting to talk about that. That's great.
And the last thing that I would recommend, get in Pastor Keith's mastermind and take action on that, because the price will change. But the other thing that I would recommend, and you can also find it on KeithCraft.org, is your book. You have a lot of books, but the book that I want to specifically recommend when you go to his website is Your Divine Fingerprint. So we'll actually put that specific link in there. And I think that's a great book for people that are like, hey, man, I don't know about this whole spiritual father thing, and I don't really even know what my core values are, so I don't know if I even value what I value. Go read that book. Don't listen to the audio book, because it's really hard to listen to, but go read the book.
We didn't get to decide who recorded it.
I know. On the next one, we're going to make sure that you're reading the book to us, because that will put me to sleep. Not in a bad way, but
I know.
That boy.
all good.
That was a publisher decision, not my decision.
So go get the book and buy yourself a couple copies of it, because I actually have one copy that I really just wrote a ton of notes in, and then I have another book that I use when I want to teach out of it, because I actually think it's a really great book if you're like, man, I'm on fire and I really want to start my own little community of discipleship. Use the book week over week to lead your group. I've done that before too, and it's been very effective. So Pastor Keith, is there anything else that you would like to share?
I would just think, again, the power of a father's voice is hard to estimate if you've never had it. And so, like, for instance, with Josh writing, I'll just leave it with this. He was in a mastermind with me, and I just turned to him and I said, Josh, I want you to focus on 3 things. And Josh, those 3 things were
speaking, thinking, and writing.
And that kind of set a course for him. And so that's the power of a father voice, because for the rest of his life, that's what he's going to focus on. If I'd never said that to him, I mean, I just said it. It was very strategic when I said it and timely when I said it. But those 2 books came after that. Mm-hmm. So it was like, and then as he was writing his one book, I told him he wasn't even writing it as a book. He was just teaching our mighty men. I said, "That's a book." He was like, "Really?" I go, "Yeah, really. That's like a book." And so again, that's part of the power, is that when you have a spiritual father voice in your life, they can speak things and it'll accelerate it, but also give you clarity and give you focus on what you need to be working towards. Yeah.
And I would say this also from Pastor Keith too. He gave me wisdom. I think it was probably about 2 years ago. Because I was like, man, Pastor Keith, what do I speak from stage and what am I teaching? And you simplified it for me. You said, man, you shouldn't be doing anything from stage for the next 2 to 3 years, but sharing your testimony.
100%.
So anybody that's watching this has probably heard my testimony. If you haven't, we'll put that link in the show notes as well. But that one conversation that we had really shifted and changed everything for me, because Bruce Lee said, fear not the man that's practiced 10,000 kicks one time, fear the man that's practiced one kick 10,000 times. And really that I took that quote that I love so much about mastery and put it on telling the story of what God has done in my life. And that would just be one thing. It's probably why people are listening to this podcast right now, is because they've heard my testimony. So
beautiful.
Thank you for shifting things for me, man, and not allowing me to know it wasn't about what I know, but what I've been through that can really shift and change people's lives. So awesome. I love you. Would you pray for us at the end of this?
I will. Father, first of all, I just thank you for the men around this table. God, thank you for Steve, for his heart, for Pierce, Lord, just his being wide open to the great things that you have for him. Lord, your word says in Jeremiah 33:3, call unto me, and I'll answer you, and I'll show you great and mighty things that you know not. And I thank you that Pierce is sitting in that place of, God, you're just filling his container so that for the rest of his life, he will pour out massive wisdom and massive knowledge and help people. And so I thank you for his life at this season. Thank you for Josh, Lord, for the son that he is. And Father, I just pray for the people now that are going to be the beneficiaries of this podcast. Lord, that you'd put your hand upon them. Lord, that you would give them your wisdom, your knowledge, your understanding, the ability to differentiate between good and best, good and great. And God, may they have the courage to choose to be great. Yeah. And Father, I just ask that Lord, also that your favor, a divine assigned advantage for success. And Father, continue to put your hand on Steve, continue to expand and increase his influence as he honors you, as he does everything that he does to glorify you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, be blessed. Share this episode with somebody and go to keithcraft.org and level up your thinking. We'll see y'all next week.